Join us as soon as we get her connected here. I want to welcome you all to the regularly scheduled city council meeting for the governing body of Spring Hill, Kansas on September 14th, 2023. If you guys would all stand with me, we have Pastor Zach Terrell here that's going to do the invocation for us.
Father, we thank you for this opportunity to serve our community. Thank you for these officials that will make decisions that affect us all. And we pray for blessing on our businesses and safe and enriching environments for our children and families to grow and thrive. And we pray for favor for our community as we live the lives that you've given to us to live. And we pray that you would help the decisions, that there would be wisdom, and that there would be just a listening ear and a heart to guide. And we pray that you would bring all things to pass in Spring Hill as it is in heaven, according to your will. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, if you could please take the roll.
Mrs. Roth? Mr. Peel?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mrs. North?
Here.
Mr. Van Houten?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum present.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Staff requests to add formal item 6A, consider request to exchange federal funds and authorize the mayor to sign appropriate documents. Are there any other requested changes or additions? If not, I entertain a motion to accept the agenda as present or as amended.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, who seconded? Oh, thank you.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0-0. Amy, you want to let me know if she does get on there so I have the count right. Next, we'll move on to citizen participation. This is a time where citizens can step up and say what's on their mind. And we just ask that you would state your name and your address if you do so. The first person we have on the list is Mr. Rodolfo Arvalo.
I wanted to speak on the budget. That's not possible during the budget discussion.
Really should probably be right now. That's fine.
Sounds good. Last time I was here, I was questioned on my numbers, so I'm going to try and stick to the numbers on your budget. One of the things you might recall that I mentioned is that if you projected a certain mill level, that you would get to that mill level. And this budget is an indication of that. In both cases, you wanted a 41 mills. You came out at 40.993, pretty doggone close. The other one was 28 mills you projected. You came out at 27,887. So the statement I made last meeting, I think, was very appropriate, since you seem to have done what I said you would do, which is that you developed a budget to match the highest mill levy you are willing to go by. The other is that will raise some questions about the need for you maybe to look a little bit more clearly at the numbers that you're provided, because, for example, on page, I can't see that, page 4, under statement of indebtedness, I don't know how you continue to pay on bonds that have already expired. On your first list of column of obligations, you have 2023A, there were bonds that were issued in 2023, and they're supposed to be retired on 9/1/1933. I don't know how you managed to do that. Under GO bonds, you have a Blackhawk Apartments Phase 2, which are to be issued in 5/1/31/19. And they're retired in 1930. I don't know why we're paying on stuff we haven't bonded and that's already been retired. Those are just things you might want to take a look at because it might affect the budget that was presented. The other that I would indicate to you is I look at the general fund budget recommendation on 6A. I don't have the details, so I don't know what is meant by under expenditures administration. But for the last two past years, the amount expended has been around $340,000. But for next year, you're budgeting $686,000. That's an 100% increase in that line item. Administration, quite frankly, I don't think really provides services to the citizens of Spring Hill. I don't know if it's a new initiative that somebody's launching, but you've increased it 100%. The next item, general obligation. You've historically allocated 1.2 million or so every year. This, for 2024, you want to obligate $3 million. That's an increase of $1.7 million, which is a 104% increase. I don't have the details, so I can't tell you what's included in general obligation. If you just take those two items, that's an increase of $2 million, a little above $2 million, which equals to 12.5 mils. I would question why those are so high, and I would suggest that you reconsider that particular allocation. Also, it appears that you have other funding in other areas that could that around which taxes are levied. For example, on page 10, under sales tax, you have potentially the ability to use $1.9 million. I think you're only using $1.4 million. That leaves you with a reserve or unencumbered, if you will, as it's listed here, of $508 million. That could be transferred to the general fund. $1 million of that 1.4 million that you are budgeting is really a reserve. 1 million of it is a reserve. So that also could be really transferred to general fund instead of raising the mill levy. Under page 11, excise tax, you basically do the same thing. You are transferring $1 million out of the 2 million that you have that you propose to collect. That leaves another $1 million. You could also transfer some of that dollars to the general fund instead of raising the mill levy. Hopefully, that'll help you take a look at your budget. I know that it probably won't change, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that would like to step up and say anything?
Mayor, I believe Mrs. Roth is on the phone, if I could call her name.
You there, Mrs. Roth?
I am.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. There's no one else that would like to speak from the public. We'll go ahead and close citizen participation at this point. Move on to the next item. Next item is consent agenda. This is items that the staff considers routine maintenance. But if there are any questions by the governing body up here, I'd be glad to answer those or try to answer them. If not, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next, we'll move on to formal council action. The first item on the agenda is consider approval of change order number 4 to the street maintenance base repair and crack seal project with McEnany Construction, Inc. of Shawnee, Kansas, in the total amount of $249,740. And Mr. Miller, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I come before you this evening to consider change order 4 to our annual street maintenance contract, the base repair and crack seal project. This change order will affect Woodland Road, which we've been talking about for some time. The contractor for the Boulder Springs subdivision recently completed his responsibilities under the maintenance bond for that. We intend to follow up with some additional base repairs on Woodland Road from 199th to 191st, north of the Boulder Springs subdivision, and then put a 3-inch asphalt overlay on that along with pavement markings. McEnany has indicated that currently, if the change order is approved, that they've scheduled that work for around October 1st-ish. They'll also be paving Victory Road and doing the mill and overlay on Harrison all at the same time. Because Kansas Heavy should have Harrison ready for them at that time as well. So, change order city standard. This is proposed by the finance director to be paid for from proceeds from the 2023 bond funds. With that, I would recommend approving change order 4 from McEnany Construction in the amount of $249,740. And I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
I think this is something we've all talked about up here for a long time. It was something that's been in the works for a long time, and probably the worst street in the city, has been for a while now. So I know it was closed off about a week ago or so, a week and a half ago, to do some repairs. And a lot of people thought that was like the permanent repair, but that was just some base repairs along with these other base repairs before we overlay the whole thing. So yeah, I think it's very much needed, and yeah.
The part that the developer did, is that with the intersection of Woodland and 196? Basically the
Just south of there.
Okay, but it's, when I first read it, I was thinking the entryway off of 199th, and I didn't think that was the right
No.
location.
No, it's the bridge there, right? Kinda.
Right, there's a box culvert there, and they work just south of the intersection. There's some more work in the intersection to the north, base repairs, and 3 or 4 places up to 191st.
If you drive it,
Yeah,
you'll find where it still needs repair.
Yeah, kind of the top of the hill and where they're running that dirt operation out of the county, and then at the intersection, and then a little bit at 191st proper.
That's a county? Dirt work up there?
Well, no, it's, the property is in the county.
Gotcha.
So this will be new asphalt the entire way, 191st, 199th?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we did now and some of the other stuff we're gonna do is just base repairs. So if you see asphalt, it's not necessarily the final product.
Yeah.
It's some of the base repairs, which were very much needed.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? If not, my personal opinion, this is a no-brainer, but if anybody else has any other opinions, feel free to add them.
No, I think it's necessary. The road's trash, so any improvements are good improvements. And I've driven it recently. You can tell they've done work, the base repair. It's not finished, so. Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
All right, if there are no further questions or comments, I entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve change order number 4 to the street maintenance base repair and crack seal project with McInerney Construction Incorporated of Shawnee, Kansas, in the total amount of $249,740.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of change order number 1 to the 2023 street maintenance improvement project with Kansas Heavy Construction of Tonganoxie, Kansas, in the total amount of $207,888,000.75. Mr. Miller, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. As you indicated, this is change order 1 to the 2023 Street Improvement Program, which is with Kansas Heavy Construction of Tonganoxie. Change order 1 has 2 fundamental elements in it. The first one is to, we were in the plans which were put out in the spring, we were running 2 lanes of concrete on 183rd just east of 169 Highway. What we're doing for about 300 feet there is we're widening that to 3 lanes so that when we would put a traffic signal in there in the future, that we'll have the ability to put left and right turn lanes in there without having to come back and add more pavement. And as you know, KDOT has done studies, traffic studies on the intersections down through there, and we think it's pretty likely that intersection is going to be at least warrant a signal, and we'll be pushing for that over the next few years, but we don't want to have to come back and do a bunch of pavement work to accommodate it. Obviously, with the heavy truck traffic that comes out of the light industrial area and the concrete plant to the east, having turn lanes when the signal's there is really going to help because those trucks are awfully slow. So if there's the more lanes you can get them going outbound, the better the signal will, or the intersection will function. The second item is down on Lincoln, which we're constructing again right now. They're paving on it. We found that we were only replacing curb where it was visually bad. And it did not appear to be bad curb. Usually our curb in this area that's old is decracked. It suffers from a poor aggregate that we used to use. And it's pretty obvious when it's bad. Turns out this curb, when we started pulling it, has a problem. The KDOT was using, or the KDOT method, this is probably not built by KDOT, but the details used a metal joint flashing in between the curb and the paving. And turns out that metal just disintegrated and it caused the curb to disintegrate down in the front face of the curb. So we didn't know until we took it out that a lot of that curb was bad, which is pretty unusual. I've not really seen that. They have since changed the way they build those things. We have too, of course. Anyway, so we're adding curb replacement for all the panel, adjacent to all the panels that we're replacing out there. That will fix this problem. It'll go back in a different fashion, of course. So that's the second area. This funding for this change order will also come from the 23 bond issue fund, since Lincoln in general, all of Lincoln is coming from the bond issue fund. So with that, I recommend approving change order 1 from Kansas Heavy Construction in the amount of $207,888.75.
And for anybody in the public that's not aware, that's over there by Clorox and Seats and all those industrial stuff there, off of 207.
North of the railroad tracks?
Both sides, south and north. We're reconstructing all of it,
Whole
yes.
thing.
Well, everything that the city didn't reconstruct over the years, that they were kind of knocking it off a couple hundred feet at a time. Yeah, there's virtually all of it. I don't know the exact percentage, but a lot. And we're also improving the curb return radius. Right now, all the trucks that come eastbound on 191st and turn south, drive through the Seats, there's like a 20-foot curb return radius, and all these semis are way off the road. So we're doing some geometric improvements at the intersection as well.
Which I know they'll all be excited about. I've heard about that one from quite a few of those businesses, so I'll be glad when that's done. Any other questions or comments?
I think he said 191st, but we're talking 199, or excuse me, 207th. Right?
207th.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
You're correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't lost. Thank
Right. No, I was.
All right, with that, I entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve change order number 1 to the 2023 street improvement project with Kansas Heavy Construction of Tonganoxie, Kansas, in the amount of $207,888.75.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to one I'm pretty excited about as well. Consider appointment of Public Works Director. We had quite a few good applications, but there was a few that stood out above the rest. And my recommendation of the Public Works Director, his name is Jacob Spear. This man has served about 25 years in Public Works, almost 25 years in Public Works departments. He has been the director of a large city, as director of Public Works in a city quite a bit larger than ours, and just has many, many years of experience. Brings a level of professionalism to our whole department. And he went through interviews with staff, drilled them with questions from us, and then also Public Works Department. We brought in some of those guys and had them kind of hammer questions at him as well, and he did very well and excelled in every way in that. So I'm excited about that. So at this point, with the governing body's approval, I'd like to appoint Mr. Jacob Spear as the Public Works Director. Any questions or comments from any of the governing body?
No.
And Mr. Jacob is here if anybody has any questions, or you want to wave your hand back there.
No, we're happy to have him on board.
Yep,
He's a
we're
winner.
excited to have you. Do you need
Is there
a
a-
formal motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Need a formal motion.
I make a motion to approve the appointment of Jacob Spear to the position of Public Works Director.
Second.
Got a motion to second. Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Welcome aboard, sir.
Congratulations.
Next item on the agenda is consider request to exchange federal funds and authorize the mayor to sign appropriate documents. And Mrs. Dunn, you have the floor.
I appreciate you adding this one at the last moment. I got an email that came to the former Public Works Director and got forwarded to me yesterday with a deadline of tomorrow on it. And so this is a program, it's a federal funds exchange program where the state of Kansas will allow us to submit street or public improvement related invoices and get 90% of that money back from federal funds. And so this is really a small housekeeping thing. This will get us about $96,000 and a little extra. And we are submitting the work that was done on the stoplight for 199th and Webster. It's a completed project, nice and tidy, and we'd like to submit that. The mayor needs to sign it. It's part of a master agreement that's been in place since 2016, and we'll be happy to take advantage of somebody else's money. And so I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them about federal funds exchange.
Do we max it out? Do we max out what we could get?
Yes, they tell us how much we're eligible for, and then give us 90% of that.
Okay.
And so they tell us the amount. We're actually submitting far more than that because that project cost quite a bit more. So we made it simple and did that. And then we can do this program every year.
Oh,
And we usually get about the same amount. And then we can put this money to work on another project.
Awesome.
great.
Any other questions, comments?
Nope.
If not, I entertain a motion.
So I make a motion to exchange federal funds and authorize the mayor to sign appropriate documents.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you very much. That ends formal council action at this time. We'll move on to a discussion item. First item on the discussion is 2024 operating budget and the 2024 through 2028 capital improvement projects. And Mrs. Dunn, you have the floor.
Thank you. I want to start out by answering some questions that Rodolfo brought up in his discussion. I'm gonna turn around and smile at him. So he knows I'm never upset with him. I appreciate he asks questions and pays attention. And I am going to refer you to the packet, which has been published and put out. And so I'm gonna start with, let's talk for a second about the projected mill levy. When we set the cap at 41 and 28, I simply rounded off because we had the mill levy last year of 35.933, and then 27.887. And, I'm sorry, 22.887. You gave us approval for a potential 5 mil increase, so I simply added 5 mils on. We balanced the budget with the current 2023 mill levy. So I don't build a budget to the amount that I can. How much can I get? It's, I have to make it work within our existing budget and then the 5 mils, and that's all that is, simple math. I'm gonna skip over the administration one because the presentation I'm gonna give, I'll talk about that in more detail. But I would like to look at page 6A, general obligation, which is about the third line down. And the budget, one of the most important functions of this budget document that you will sign is actually on the very first page. And it's at the top in the tiny print that says they will be adopted in the second sentence and adopted as the maximum expenditures for the various funds. So you are saying you are giving yourselves the authority up to these dollar amounts to spend the city's money. So in the budget, we spend out every dollar as if you were gonna spend your cash reserves, so that if you needed to spend those reserves, you've given yourself the authority. I can't think of a situation where you'd suddenly need money that you'd have to spend your cash reserves. We would have a big problem. But we also wouldn't have to stop, publish in the paper, wait 10 days when we're dealing with an emergency. So the reason that general obligation is higher is 2 reasons. One, that's where I solve out $1.25 million in cash to give you the authority to spend it. That's also where the new bond payment comes in, which is $689,000. That is what is in that line, which is all planned. I don't plan to see you spend your cash, but you will have the authority to do so if you need to. So that's what happened in general obligation. On page 10, sales tax for the city. This is a sales tax that was approved by the citizens. It is meant for recreation and the aquatic center. So we cannot just simply transfer the balance in that fund to the general fund. The taxpayers gave us purpose for that money, and that's what it's used for. It's transferred to pay the debt on the swimming pool and Veterans Lane. It's also can be used for the maintenance of parks and recreation. And so my plan is in 2024, when we identify a major repair or improvement we need to make at the aquatic center, to use these funds, not the general fund, to make those larger repairs. And that would be within the requirements of that sales tax. It's meant to support the aquatic center, parks and recreation. So that is why we can't just transfer the money. And again, when you read this page 10, I'm simply giving you authority to spend this. If suddenly you think of $1 million thing we need, or what if, God forbid, with some repair we need that costs a lot of money, this budget gives you the authority to do that, up to $1,463,000. Then when we go on to page 11, which is excise tax, it's a very similar thing. Excise tax is governed by statute. It is paid by developers on final plats when they split it into lots and everything, and the final plat is done, they paid excise tax. There are specific purposes for that money, for development, and it cannot be transferred to the general fund for general uses. So this again is another fund that we give you the authority to spend if a project comes along, but it is not meant to be transferred to the general fund.
Quick question on excise.
Yeah.
Are we gonna hit the estimate for 23?
No. It will come in lower than that.
So should we lower the proposed, I mean, this is just a thought, why are we doing the same amount than if we aren't hitting it this year?
For the transfers in or the excise
Just
taxes?
the excise tax,
I will look at
Are you talking
that.
about total receipts?
talking about the excise tax line.
Yeah, up at the top.
Our budget, our estimate this year is 400, but we're not gonna even come close to that, I don't think. And so.
I
would
will
wanna
look at
adjust-
that.
I would wanna adjust to 24s, cause I don't
Right.
think it's gonna be any better in 24.
I think we took the premise that 24 will look like 23 actual, not necessarily 23
actually, you
budget.
think we'll get to the 400?
I don't think so. Amy may know that better than me. I don't think we're anywhere near 400 yet.
Yeah, so that's why when we wanna estimate
Yep.
the actual is for 23,
I will double check that.
the estimated actual.
Yep. Yes. So those are just my responses back so everyone understands. This document is not my favorite document. I will tell you the OpenGov budgeting program is going really well. We're on schedule. We will issue a budget book that is not a state form. It's a lot more informative, a lot better information, and that's the whole reason that we did that was I don't think this budget form, which we're required to do, is helpful to the public at all, or to you guys. It's just, meets the state requirements.
When do we anticipate OpenGov will be ready to be able to produce
We will complete,
things like this that we can have?
yep, we will complete the project by the end of October. And then it's up to how much, the staff, I plan to issue a budget book in 2023 for 2024.
Sweet.
I'm hoping November. Remember that when I make everybody do their share, but yeah, that's my plan. Okay, so tonight I'm gonna talk about the operating budget. And I've got just a few slides. I'm not gonna talk about capital improvement plan tonight. I think we've talked about that enough in detail. I can give you a little bit of an update on that, and but I'm not gonna go in great detail on that plan tonight. What I have done is taken the revenue and the expense, and remember, the operating budget I have balanced at the current mill levy with no increase. And then I'm adding on the 5 mills we proposed, and I'll present that to you on Monday night. And then depending on the outcome there, I'll have other cases that can be presented for your consideration. At the end of tonight, we'll talk about that a little more. So let's talk about the revenue. And I did make a hard copy of this for the governing body because I thought you might want to have that handy. I feel like it kind of summarizes information as opposed to a 33-page double-sided document. This I thought might be a little more helpful. But this has 2023's year-end or budget and then the estimated year-end, and you can see that we will be about 421,884 better than budget. Almost all of that coming from sales tax, of course. Franchise tax is up a little bit, alcohol's right on target. And then fees and services are down, and that's primarily due to court is running under, which is consistent with their prior years. And then on development, fees, permit fees and things like that are lower than we budgeted. Otherwise, sales tax has rebounded, and August, I have to think what month I'm in, August is again above prior year. July was above prior year, May and June were below. So I estimated out the rest of the year equal to 2022, and we will run about 400,000 over at that rate. Can I answer any questions about 23 performance before I move on to the budget?
You probably said this and I just wasn't paying attention. The miscellaneous, what's the big difference there?
The things we sold on Purple Wave.
Okay.
And so I don't repeat that in 24 because I don't expect it. I did add a little bit for the vehicles we'll sell through Enterprise or we replaced them. Any other questions on 23? Looks pretty good as expected and consistent with what I've reported the last 2 quarters. For 2024, ad valorem, of course, is the mill levy is the same. So that increase is due to increased assessed value. Sales and use tax, I have put a slight increase in there. more people. We have about 9,500 people living here now. And so I did bump sales tax, but I still feel like it's a good conservative number. We've been running 10 to 20% over prior years. Liquor increased. The economy is causing, no, I'm just kidding. The liquor tax has increased slightly. Franchise tax due to more homes and more citizens. I did reduce fees and services. One, I did reduce the court. We keep putting the same number in for the court that doesn't achieve that number, so why are we continuing to budget that number? And then we have adjusted some of the fees for right-of-way and development and everything that we're under target on, assuming 24 will look more like 23. And then miscellaneous is back down to a normal level with a small amount for vehicles we're gonna sell. I put in at the bottom there what our population in 23 and 24 looks like, and then what our revenue per citizen would be. And based on a population increase of 297 people, the revenue increase from that population would be about $257,800, which with the ad valorem increase makes sense for the 750,000 increase we're showing over 23. So we're going to budget, or the budget is proposed for revenue at $8,781,000 for 2024. Can I answer any questions about 24?
No, I mean, it looks like it's.
Ms. Dunn, can you repeat one more time? I think you touched on it, but I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. The amount of, I'll say, revenue or income from sales tax, or I'm sorry, not sales tax. Have you touched on
Franchise?
property tax?
Yes.
What was the number that you associated with that? I apologize.
We have $3,753,000, which is an increase of $497,000.
Okay, 497 from, and that's accounted from increased number of homes as well as appraisals?
Yes. Yep. Increase
Okay,
in the
so
total value.
Okay. I think that's important to highlight because a lot of folks that I talk to say, well, my appraisal went up, you know, why can't you just live on that? And in my head, I think that number is a lot bigger, but in reality, 490, what'd you say, 497 is not as big as I anticipated.
Right. And I think an important thing to remember is revenue neutral. If you get $1 million in taxes and you expect to live on $1 million in taxes with all the increases going on around you, that's an almost impossible task. And I'll give you a really simple one. Westar Energy asked for a 4% rate increase from the Kansas Corporation Commission. We pay quite a bit in utility bills, and so that number alone, we can't really make revenue neutral work. You cut everywhere else, but we did, in this budget, we are not increasing the mill levy. The value that you're getting for ad valorem is based on the county's work on either additions for growth or increased in assessed value. Okay?
I think the thing that's interesting is when the Senate Bill 13 and tax resolution was made, that's what caused us to have the public hearings for the revenue neutral rate, because we have to declare if we exceed even by $1 at the mill levy of 2023, that we're exceeding the revenue neutral rate. That does not mean, which it really disturbs me, that we are going to raise the mill levy. That doesn't mean that we're going to raise the mill levy. That just means we have to declare that we're exceeding, even if it was by $1, staying at the mill levy of 2023. And it was because of that Senate Bill 13 tax resolution.
I will tell you, I'm sorry.
And it's also interesting because I've attended the library board meeting recently, and they spent like $355 million last year, and they have a big coffer of money. And they're ready to just throw out their money anywhere. $55 million eventually in the future for replacing Blue Valley Library. So there's all these entities that are wanting to pull from our tax money. The school district, if anybody was listening, just raised the mill levy 20%. That's going to be increase for all of us that live in Spring Hill. So we're not just talking about one thing when we need to consider this. We know inflation's going on everywhere, but there needs to be some living within the budget because the taxpayers cannot take these kind of increases. And I know that you have budgeted it within the 2023 mill levy, and I think that that's fantastic. And I hope that we can live within our budget because everything else is being increased. And I just want to make it clear to the public that I did not say yes by exceeding the revenue neutral rate to raise the mill levy because I don't feel that it needs to be. I think this is the year we are careful, we rein ourselves in. The citizens out there are not getting pay increases. And Johnson County Board of County Commissioners raised their salaries for the Board of County Commissioners because they did a study. All these studies are coming about that everybody thinks all their employees need to have their salaries raised. Cerner just laid off a ton of employees. So we need to take that into consideration, not just what a few handful out of the 9,500 people are getting increases. And Johnson County with the assessments that I think were about 30% higher. All these things add up. And how many students do we have on decreased food budgets that they get help with? They can't even afford to buy their food. And my family's been blessed that we've had a good financial year. But that's not the way it is for everybody in Spring Hill. And so I just think we need to use wisdom in how we're spending this and do the small tasks. I really approve of the improvements on the roads on 183rd and Woodland Road, but I don't approve raising the mill levy.
I'm gonna, unless you have more revenue questions, I'm gonna move on to expenses and I think this presentation I've done a good job, I'll say that about myself, of coming with the details to say, hey, to pay for this, we had to take this, and to make that work, you have to take that, to show the balancing of the budget. So let's talk about expenses. This is 22, 23, 24. This would be on page 6A. And this is where I want to point out two things. Number one, let's talk about administration for a minute. The administration department, it consists of the city administrator and the public affairs person. It's increasing from 23 to 24 for three reasons. We have proposed hiring an in-house employee city engineer. That position will be approved by, or not approved by this governing body. And the budget for that is put in administration. Someday they may have their own department, but for now we're going to put it in administration. We're going to have over a year, where all kinds of things can happen with employees. We may need to work to retain employees. We may need to add a position we're not even thinking about today. And so we have added a single additional position for that cushion. And that cushion, which is $100,000, is in that administration number. The third piece that is there is the salary study that was done, has been revamped, and sometime in the near future, they're gonna bring that to you for your approval. But because the budget has to be approved first, for the non-PD group, the total value of that, and I'll show it on the next page, is about $68,000 for the salary adjustments plus the benefits and taxes. And that has been added here in one lump sum. I don't have the details, I don't want the details. I like to be unbiased about that, and so we have budgeted that here. That's what that increase is. This governing body would approve any new position that was added and will approve or not approve the CBIZ salary adjustments when the time comes. I also want to skip to the next line under general obligation. Remember on the other report that Rodolfo pointed out to you, it was over 3 million. I took that cash piece out here so you were looking at apples to apples as opposed to the prior years where we obviously didn't spend the cash and then a year where I have to budget for the cash. So this increase you're seeing there is due to the new bond payment for the street work that we did. Another thing I want to point out here is the police department. Because of some of the laws that have been passed related to tax lids and revenue neutral and all these pieces, one of the things that gets exempted from those laws are the first responders. So with the PD, all of their expenses get allocated to their department, so that if they ever, for a reason, we're dealing with a tax lid or some of these tax laws, we have attributed everything to PD if we ever need to bring that into play. When you look at the other departments, the benefits are not in there. They don't all pay for lawyers. They don't all pay for auditors, but the police department does. I feel like that makes them look like they're really, really expensive, when the truth of it is, that's what general obligation is, all the things that are not allocated to every department. So I think that's important to point out. So what I wanted to point out to you, that's a million numbers, well, maybe not a million, but a lot of numbers. And I wanted to point out to you what this budget includes and what we removed to make it work. The bond payment, you're probably tired of hearing me say that. If we added a city engineer fully loaded for tax and benefits, is about $214,000. The new enterprise leases in the general fund costs $180,000 a year. This open position I mentioned is $119,000. If we budget for a 4% merit raise, would be $116,000. Here's that CBIZ adjustment for the PD, separate from the rest of the departments. It's a $60,000 adjustment plus taxes and benefits, which is $82,000. The individual departments made different requests for different things, and that totaled about $78,000. The CBIZ adjustment for the non-PD, it comes to right at $62,000, and then the Bobcat leases for the new equipment is $40,000 a year. To get there, we made some reductions. We removed a building official. All of these positions I'm about to talk about are vacant today. No one is losing their job. We're just not filling positions that are in the 23 budget. We're removing them for 24. An admin person in community development, one street maintenance worker. We had planned on like when I came in and the other finance director was retiring, we planned a time of double staffing to train up a new director if the previous one left. And we're gonna remove that. And then there are other miscellaneous reductions I took, like reducing the legal expense, but you had to net that against capers and KP&F increase, things like that. But the net of the other cuts was $173,000. So the total budget impact for expense related is $981,000. And we did that increase within the existing mill levy with the revenue as we see it coming. Can I answer any questions about expenditures? In the packet I gave you tonight, you have a complete line by line, department by department budget that you are very welcome to comb through, ask me questions, call me on any of it. I also added a page between it and the state budget, which is two-sided, and it's a long list. It looks like this. I removed all the departments and I said, how much do we spend on printing? How much do we spend on medical? How much do we spend on my favorite, portable restrooms? And that report lets you see what we're budgeting for the items, who cares what department it's in, versus what we didn't budget in 2023. I thought that might be a way we haven't looked at it, and also let you see where things are increasing and decreasing. So do you have any expenditure questions?
I guess just off the top of your head, as far as city engineer goes, how much did we spend in 20, or how much are we kind of going to spend in 23 on that? And how much of that would we save going with the in-house?
We would reduce in the general fund about $40,000. We spent 62. we will not be completely eliminating outside services. The majority of that savings will come from project work, like the work that Brandon is doing on project observation, on the Wiswell project and some other things. That will come from project funds. And believe we've already saved maybe $90,000 with the work that he's doing. And so probably 200,000 to 300,000 in a full year would be saved out of projects. And I'll turn around in case I misquoted.
And we're gonna have them here 40 hours a week.
Yes,
I think the majority of what we'll see is more efficiencies.
right.
We have a lot of projects going, and review of those. Not that our current city
Yeah,
engineer
I was
doesn't do a
smiling
great
too.
job. But I think it's gonna create a lot of efficiencies to have them in-house, 5 days a week, and then we can work on the projects, and there's no lag time in there.
And is that a position that would report up to the city administrator then, since it's not its own department?
Correct.
Yep. It would be appointed by this council, like the Public Works Director.
Be a department at level position.
Right.
I think it's important to see and notice, I think it's important to see and notice that
Bless you.
what's included in the 24 is, as far as staff salaries, the merit raise, the CBIZ adjustments, like that's money that will go to our current people. We will pay that money to our current staff members. And the reduction to offset some of that is getting rid of placeholder positions that we budgeted for that have never been filled, that no one has ever been paid for because nobody ever did any work with those.
Right.
So that's pretty significant to me that we're cutting out positions that we saved money for and didn't use, and we're gonna turn around and give it to our current people. So, or if approved.
If approved.
But that's what's being proposed. So I think that's really important distinction to see.
Thank you, I agree. I always feel like I just give you tons and tons and tons of information. And I do send the whole packet home because I know you can sit at home and look more closely at it.
I think we say it often, but I feel like we do have a very good staff here at the city, and I think we do want to recognize them and be grateful to them and thank them, and one way we can do that is by compensation, and, so, I mean, I know that's gonna be another discussion when we approve that. But I do think we do have a very good group of people here at the city, and I'm grateful to be working with you guys and serving you guys.
I should also point out that the budget for merit and market, that's not what we called it last year, CPI, was 7% last year, and we're reducing that to 4% total this year, which again is another reduction.
Do we have any, I guess if you haven't looked at it, you probably don't know, but do we have any idea what the CBIZ adjustments? I know we're going to a step system or looking at going to a step system for at least PD, how that'll increase our budget over the next 3 to 5 years based off of the step program?
I do not have that information. I may turn around and see. Is that something that's a part of a discussion in the future?
There we go. Sorry about that. We talked generally in the beginning that the steps look about, I think, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember the exact number. So I'm gonna say it was somewhere between 2 and 3%. And so it was discussed early on, but then the focus was more so on getting kind of through these first steps and figuring out. So we need to have a further discussion on how that's going to impact everything. I wanted to wait and see, again, what she said about what was going to get approved, so then we can go back and see what actually we can do and what makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that would just be interesting to me to see, like, okay, well, I know we're doing the adjustment now and this is what it's costing us, but what's it gonna cost us in 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
If we keep everybody in, that's the hope, right? Where are we gonna look in our permanent budget 5 years from now for that payroll? That's not gonna change. So, I'd like to see something along those lines, just to kind of see what that would look like if we can. So yeah, that's something that,
Definitely something to be good to have, so we can plan ahead and make sure that it's doable and that we can budget appropriately.
Right. Yes.
are we
4,
gonna
5, 6
keep up with the property value increases with the, with the paint, like that's my thing is, can we keep what we're committing to as far as what we're gonna do? And is that gonna, with a moderate increase in property values, so we don't have to keep increasing mill levies?
Right, yes.
Are we staying within that as each year goes on? That's kind of what's important, I think.
Yes, so definitely know that whatever gets approved, then will be worked within that and then figuring out the future impact from that. So we'll come back with you.
All right, cool.
Oh, yes, it was definitely below 4.
Yeah, I didn't remember it, from what I saw, I don't remember it being huge.
Yeah. The
So-
first one's probably the big hit and then lesser steps out.
That's what's so nice about the step system, is that you can really kind of plan out what's gonna happen.
Any other questions or comments?
Do you feel like you're missing any information? You may not know yet, but we have a meeting on Monday that, I hope that we approve a budget Monday night. That's our goal. And so if there's something you feel like you're missing that you haven't been provided, I really want to get that to you between now and Monday.
And I also want to let, in case they don't already know, let the public know that there is a public hearing notice for the 2024 operating budget. And there's going to be a special meeting on Monday, September 18th, so this coming Monday at 7 PM.
Yes,
Public is welcome if you'd like to come and talk about money.
yeah.
As is right now, this is the current mill levy with no increase.
Yes. And I want to point something out to you. So in the packet that you have, in the packet that was published in the paper, when you look on page 6, how I'm accounting for the 5 mills, it's page 6A. It's this line all by itself, $836,917. And so this is the 5 mil. My plan is to have multiple cases. I obviously don't know what you'll approve. And so I will have a case of 5. I'm happy to take your recommendations. If you say, no way, I'm going more than 2 or whatever, I will save that. But it's not a big deal for me because I did this in one lump sum. I didn't say, because we will transfer this out. If whatever mill levy increase you give us will be transferred out to a reserve for future projects. It will not be taken into the operating
Yeah.
budget.
To make your life easier, it sounds like Mrs. North has already kind of said where she stands.
I think we know.
And what?
I think we know where Mrs.
Yeah.
North stands.
I would say her and I are on the same page. I am not gonna be for any kind of mill levy increase, so
Okay.
that makes your job easier going into Monday to know kind of where we stand. I will say that too, but, I think there's even some room you could work with here. I think multiple increases is probably overdoing it to me. I would say if we're gonna do CBIZ, we get rid of the merit raises, stuff like that. I think there's some places we can still cut if we really had to, if we'd like to. I don't know if that's where everybody wanted to be, but that's where I'm at with it.
I appreciate that direction.
And if anybody else wants to give their 2 cents.
My position is, I'm not in favor of the 5 mills. I think at this point, the highest increase I would even be willing to consider would be 3. So I think anything above that is probably not worth your time to look into. That also, for me, the big question is the 199th project, and is really where the big need comes from as far as the mill levy increase. So I think it really boils down to if we want to do that this year or if we don't want to do that this year. And if we land on not doing that, then I think we will be able to accomplish a lot of our needs and wants and do a lot of good things with the operating budget that's at the same mill levy as it is this year. I also understand that doesn't put us in a great position for future growth and for developing the way that this community and the area around us is going to grow whether we want it to or not. I feel really strongly that residential growth, how quickly it will ebb and flow over the years, but we're not going to be hurting for more homes coming to our area. So that's always going to be there for us for quite a long time, I think. So that opportunity is always gonna be there. And I think generally, operationally, we can do most of the things that we wanna do with the mill levy we have now, or perhaps even reducing it a little bit, which is what a lot of entities try to do, which is not revenue neutral, but it's a good middle ground of lowering the mill levy a little bit and also getting more revenue at the same time. Our challenge is CIP and infrastructure. The thing that really stood out with me we have a 5-year CIP budget that I believe the stat is about 2% of it is funded.
That's true.
And we have some items that are big problems on that list that need addressed soon. And the waiting game of how long can we wait on those the pressure is gonna get higher and higher and greater year after year if we keep putting it off. But I also, with the way the valuations changed, this past year, I don't think it's really all that fair to double whammy our citizens. I think that really hurts bad. So for me, it's the whole decision is about 199th Street and that project. So, and I also understand that doing that project, but other ones like it, are what are going to lead us to more economic growth, more commercial growth, more sales tax producing growth that is our best way to contribute to consistently lowering the mill levy. And the decisions are going to get harder year after year, not easier. So I understand there's a lot of negatives with not jumping into the CIP as heartily as we want to, but I also understand that we have to do right by our people too. So finding the middle ground of that is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm at. I'm at a point where I'm like, 2024 for me is kind of a stop year. Like, okay, let's see where things are gonna go, and that's. So for me, I'm okay with a lot of that slowing down, waiting for the year, and then we can readdress. I mean, whoever's up here next year can readdress that. At that point, and I think we'll have people that can speak to that this year, and say what they want to do in the future, and then the citizens have a lot more say in it. Going forward. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. That's I'm happy with how you kind of adjust this and made everything work in different ways. Like I said, I would probably maybe pull things from the what's included and replace it with something that was reduced. And if we're going to keep it the same if we're not going to lower.
Yeah, so I've thought about this ad nauseum, and thanks, Rhonda. She's helped me through a lot of the more details. So the revenue neutral, I think, is difficult to get to, maybe impossible, but very difficult in our sort of a situation, which is low population density, very little industrial tax base, and very little retail tax base. So it's on the citizens at this point. And so I think that a flat mill levy, which is not revenue neutral, but there's no change in the mill levy. I think that just with inflation and the cost of goods and services, I think that does a good job of covering us for the year if there's no big projects that come on. So, and I don't think this is the right time for big projects, guys, gals and girls, women. I think I think that if we have a really hot button for a project in the future, I think that will be something to justify whatever, maybe a mill increase, maybe not, but I think right here now it's flat, is my recommendation. I think that we can survive as an organization with the mill levy not changing. But look, my house increased 12% this year. I mean, it's like like when Ms. North said, we're fortunate. It's not like we are trying to figure out where we're going to get food. But I realize everybody's not in that same situation. So we have to run the organization too. So that said, I think a flat mill levy for the year is probably the prudent thing. Not knowing where we're going to be going. Our growth is just not linear. It's like we have a development here, we have a development here, and there's about a mile that separates it, right? And you got to, so who's responsible for those roads? generally speaking, it's us. So those we have to cross those bridges when we get to them. I do have some recommendations just to put in here, just four things I think that are things we should consider in the future. The first one is getting rid of the dang non-fire fire. Like I talked to the guy, the fire chief. Asked him why it's that way. He says because it's been that way for 24 years. He doesn't know. So I don't know what it takes to get the non-fire versus fire figured out. I think that would be I think it just simplify things for everybody. I think we ought to look at Edgerton's doing a senior rebate. They are allocating $65,000 for seniors, and I think that helps people on fixed incomes. I think it helps people who are getting worried about being priced out of the community. Generally speaking, people who are retired and don't have a source of income. And then I think a couple other things, just a spitball. I think we ought to look at CIDs, community improvement districts, for some of this infrastructure needs we have. And I'm not talking about CIPs for residents. I'm talking about on businesses. I'm talking about collecting on retail sales tax. I'm talking about the industrial park tax. Here's the reality. Many of the businesses, and it's not, we need to penalize them, but they're not necessarily our citizens. They have a business here, and we appreciate it. But if Pat Burton always says, we need a good mix. And the more I see it with this budgeting, I think we do need a good mix. So I think that, any way we can find to offset the the property tax on the average citizen is good. So I think we ought to look at CIDs for infrastructure. And then, I saw Overland Park the other day is requiring all new development to put in concrete roads.
Yep.
And you know why? It's because they put them in and they got to worry about them. We don't have to worry about them for 15 years compared to 6 years with asphalt. So let's put that on the developers, Like you were talking about planning out things. 15 years versus 7 years.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Well, we talked about that a while back when we found out that it's only about an 8 or 10% increase. It's just hard to get concrete.
It's just hard to get concrete.
But
I
think
concrete
it's something we
is.
think about for sure on new development, because
Right.
I don't see why we wouldn't try to force it on them a little bit. So.
Those are my ideas. I think you did a good job, Rhonda. Thank you. I support a flat mill.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. Not to be an echo chamber, but I'll kind of echo some of the things everyone said. I think our citizens are already, like I've said before, taxed out the wazoo, and I think just if we were to increase the mill levy, I think it'd just be one more thing that a lot of families can't afford. So I do not support as many meetings as I sat in and see the need for the revenue for some of the projects that we have planned and some of the projects that are needed, some of the infrastructure stuff. I still don't think that our citizens can handle being burdened with that by raising their taxes. So I do not support raising the mill levy.
That makes it kind of easy.
Save you a
I was
little extra.
gonna-
That's all I was worried about when I started it. I was like, I just want to make sure she knows at least where I stand.
Yeah, and yes,
You and I have talked ad nauseam.
Mrs. Roth had a comment.
yes, please.
Sorry, guys. I know it's wonky when you got somebody on the phone. There's delays and whatnot. So I agree with what a lot of the rest of the governing body is saying. My concern is going to be directed back at the governing body, and I think here's my concerns and my questions. We keep saying we want to ease the burden of this tax responsibility from our citizens. And I 100% agree. We got to figure out a way to bring in a different mix of growth, not just rooftops, but businesses, commerce, etc. So again, I think Brian already mentioned it. The way we do that, we bring in infrastructure that allows them to come to our community. So my concern is we're the 199th project. We've got a partner, CARS, that's willing to say, I'd like to foot a good chunk of that bill. My concern, and I actually talked to Mr. Miller about this, what would happen if we said, never mind, we're not going to do that next year? Is CARS going to say, well, see you later. We're taking our money and we're going to give it to somebody else. He wasn't exactly able to answer directly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Miller, but he said it's a possibility that it's very possible that they will take those funds that have been allocated towards that project and, maybe give it to another organization that is going to use them if we're putting that project on hold. So I hate to see a partner funding source be lost. I hate to see a project that is going to get us closer to having more businesses, potentially commerce down the road, come in and help ease that burden. And I also hate to see money that we've already spent on the project, I'll say, go to the wayside. Not to say it won't ever happen, but if I get that next year is kind of a wait and see year. Rhonda, you've said it. Chad, you've said it. And I get that, but I don't anticipate costs of projects like this going down. So, I mean, if the money's not there, the money's not there. I get it. But if we want to ease the burden of the taxes on the citizens, why not get the project done at the lowest price point, which would, in my opinion, be sooner rather than later? You wait 2 years, inflation is going to make it go up 10%, and we've lost our funding partner. So now instead of paying this price, we're now responsible for the full bill plus, however much percent more it's going to cost. So I agree. I don't want to burden the citizen anymore. Every single one of us up on that governing body is a citizen as well. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. But I do want to look at the long game, and that's my concern with eliminating the 199th project. Because if we eliminate the 199th project, yeah, it'll ease burden next year, but what about the following year? And the year after that, and 5 years down the road, and 10 years down the road? If we push that project back, I fear a domino effect of, we'll push it off till later. Well, that pushes the cost up, that pushes the developments back, that pushes all that commerce and business that could have come in sooner and eased the tax burden sooner, pushes it further down the road. We're kicking that can further and further. So again, I don't want to raise taxes. I want to figure out what the best solution is to get the tax burden off of the citizens. I'm just looking at it from a different lens, thinking that this 199th project, while yes, it would, it's not in the budget presented tonight by Ms. Dunn, but if we could get it in, say next year, what can we do to make that happen, and what does that look like? And I just really want to evaluate the pros and the cons. Again, I'm not saying I want to do a $5 million increase, but I think it's important to look at what happens when we eliminate that project and it's not in the budget. And we've got developers. Sorry.
Go ahead.
We've got developers lined up, ready to go. Again, not to say that we need more rooftops, but I do believe there's a commercial component to that development that could come in and maybe not be a huge player, but bring some amenities and things like that, God, I would love to have another Quick Trip. I would love to have another, or Quick Trip like business, or another industrial business that really helps ease this tax burden. So those are my concerns, and I realize we're not going into a full-blown CIP discussion tonight, but those are the things that worry me if we eliminate the 199th project. And again, I don't know where I'm going to fall on this. I just think we need to look at not just 2024, but we need to look at how that decision affects 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Because it might make it a lot worse in 5 years. I don't know. I don't have my crystal ball on me.
I think a lot of that's a fear tactic. I sat in the Johnson County Board of Commissioners. I've sat in at the library one today. Everybody has this theory that if we don't go do it, then we're going to lose quality and we're going to lose all these things. And that 20% increase that we just got on our school district is the highest that Johnson County or Miami has ever had. And we've got a middle school that's half full right now, that it's extra administration And I just think we just need to be wise. And if we polled every citizen in Spring Hill right now, they could care less about 199th Street. It's just like if I wanted to go buy the latest QLED, best TV out there, 85-inch, Nebraska Furniture Mart had a sell that you could get the 2023 one for half the price, and there was 10 models. Or you can get it for $4,000, double the amount in 2024. Did that make me change my mind? No. Because this year isn't the year that I felt I wanted to invest in that. And I'll take my chances of what the next sell is that comes up. I just think that we need to be careful. We're a handful of people up here that represent every one of our 9,500 population in Spring Hill. And the infrastructure will come. But to me, I don't feel like it's a rush. And I'm not going to let fear cause me to make a decision that I don't think is in the best interest with every other increase for our Spring Hill residents.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page of, I know infrastructure is needed to get some of this commercial stuff in, but at the same time, I maybe rather use some of our funding abilities to go through CIDs to get them actually here and help them construct what they want to do.
Bingo.
I think they're less concerned about the infrastructure and more concerned about having help to get started. So I would probably venture more towards that way than some of the big projects. But that's just me talking to, the actual people who are thinking about coming in here. So that's the feedback I've gotten. So for me, infrastructure wise, they're not as concerned as they are with some of these other avenues of funding that maybe we can help with.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I think to look at creative ways to fund future projects is going to be the solution, not adding taxes to the resident. I just it's just 9,000 people. You can squeeze so much out of a lemon, right? To make lemonade, and then you're just gotta. So I think that I think the CID is a good idea. I think looking at some of these other things we've discussed, I think it's look. I think I asked Ron today, what's it take to raise the retail sales tax? I think if you're gonna, I don't know, maybe I think CID would probably be better because you can generalize, Quick Trip, and you don't have to say, because then that argument becomes, well, the restaurants or the few restaurants we have, or the Family Dollar, I don't know, those sort of things. That actually catches up with everybody if you just raise, that sort of necessities. But I think that, consumers are the way to go if we can find creative ways to squeeze more retail sales tax. I think industrial, I'm not really big on abatements. I think one thing Pat Burton has done in the industrial park is almost no abatements there, right? I mean, it's almost all tax money.
pretty low compared to some. Yeah.
Compared to some, meaning we're making money there. So I'm not saying anything pro or negative against the industrial park. I'm just saying there's value there that's not that the citizen offsets the citizens' responsibilities. So it's tough. To go full circle with Ms. Roth's comments, I'm the same way. I think that we need to be looking at projects. I think it's also timing. And I just think the timing right now is really bad with the uncertainty of interest rates and just I think it's just very uncertain. We have okayed quite a few developments, and I think that's the nature of it. But of those, a few get break ground, and a lot of them just sit. So
That's what I was saying. Excise tax is way down, so I'm not super worried about Now, one thing too, my understanding is what we've kind of the design, everything for 199th is all included in the $5 million bond we did, right? Or can be?
Yes. The budget for design of 199th Street, and I'm gonna turn around and look at Dan, is about 370,000, something roughly. We've spent less than 100,000 so far. That doesn't mean they haven't done more work. It just hasn't been billed to us yet.
Yeah.
And so we would have, $370,000.
But that's something that if we pause it for a year or two, that's usable information we have, or would you have to start from scratch?
I don't think you'd start from scratch.
No, but this may be a good time to bring Dan up and provide a little additional information about a meeting he attended last week. I don't necessarily think it's a fear factor, but it's a data point that maybe the governing body should hear, and kind of have his input on Hundred
Talking
nine.
about Cars project.
Because what we're talking about is about $3.6 million, so it's not small dollars, and that equates to about $300,000 a year by pushing it off as far as, additional costs. So,
Evening, again. So, I do traditionally attend the CARS Technical Review Committee meetings. I've been attending them kind of in the city's behalf, until we got Mr. Spear aboard. And have been, programming and of course, going through the governing body every year on your CARS proposals. A little bit of background, 199th Street, was approved for about $1.18 million in 2023 CARS. It's, sometimes the big projects are what they call them continuation programs. If they know you've got a larger project, like typically a thoroughfare, sometimes they'll spread that over 2 years because we're not gonna spend all the money in 1 year anyway. So in 2024, we requested the continuation funding and that was approved, of course, 23, in the amount of, the remainder of the eligible at that time, $2.46 million, for a total funding of about 3.6. The 2024 recommendation was approved by the CARS Technical Review Committee, last week. And we'll go to the BOCC, I presume at the next meeting sometime here, maybe even September, early October. They're getting a little later each year with that. They're trying to get it pulled back up a little bit. Because it would be nice to have some of those decisions completely done before a lot of the cities, as Spring Hill is doing your budget deliberations, so you know what's been approved and what hasn't. Although historically, the TRC recommendation has, to my knowledge, always been approved by the Board of County Commissioners. And the Technical Review Committee is made up of, county staff and mostly directors of public works or city administrators, throughout the county, by the way. And Mr. Spear will be our attendee to that typically. The project is in final design. We're working towards what we call field check plans or right-of-way plans. Normally, if we're gonna build that job in 2024, which is already a year behind based on the CARS money, we would try to get that out to bid very early in 24 to get good prices and have the best opportunity to substantially complete the project, at least in 2024, if not totally complete it, get it open to traffic and, through that construction season. To do that, we'll fairly soon be needing to acquire right-of-way and easements for that. And so we can't take that step without knowing pretty firmly a construction schedule and when it would be funded and constructed, because the temporary construction easements have to have an end date on them. And if I don't know when I'm building the job, I can't put an end date in there, and the valuation of those easements is based on how long but you're renting these people's property effectively, and so how long you rent it has an impact on the valuation and the easement award you would make to them. So all that needs to be solidified for us to get beyond into right-of-way acquisition. Otherwise, the project, you can go to final design with the engineering pretty much, but there's through right-of-way negotiations, there often are at least minor changes that happen on the project design to accommodate property owners. So it's really best to get that right-of-way acquisition done early in the final design phase, past the right-of-way phase, so you can make those adjustments. But the project could be 95% designed, call it, and kind of shelves. If it were going to be built fairly soon afterwards, if it's going to sit on the shelf a long time, obviously it's hard telling what's going to happen.
what's a long time?
It depends on what goes on out there, what development, things like that can cause you to have to go back out and, do a bunch of resurvey and a bunch of rework.
If there's not a lot of development, if we delayed it a year or two.
No, I don't think that would
That's
cause,
what I'm saying.
I don't think,
delaying.
the design is not terribly perishable, and I think it's, from a design standpoint, yes, it could.
And from my understanding, talking to at least one guy at the county, it's not a huge deal, even sometimes just kind of limping along and pushing it out a year is not a huge deal.
And I don't think any of us up here are saying we don't want to do the 199th project. I think we're saying
you're gonna need it at some
maybe
point,
right
yeah.
now is not the time.
Right,
Timing's bad.
and CARS projects, so what I'm gonna get into some of the implications, CARS projects do slide 1 or 2 years, particularly big ones due to right-of-way and utility relocation issues and things like that. The roundabout slid 2 years. It was a 2019 CARS project. We built it in 21. So that does happen. I don't think that as Councilmember Roth indicated, I don't think that the county would take any, at least based on historical data, any
offense or?
would try to claw the money back or cancel the project on us from that. What the larger implication, I believe, is that obviously, if you do delay it 2 years, there'll be questions at CARS meetings. There always are about progress, substantial progress. And it's not as hard and fast as it is on a federal aid project, but they're still, want to know how you're making progress because we've encumbered $3 million of the CARS program, and it's sitting in the bank waiting to be spent. This particular year is interesting because, and this came out, and I knew it was going to come out last Friday. The city of Spring Hill, a couple other smaller growing cities in the county, have successfully requested and receives CARS funding in a 5-year rolling program, which is kind of how we look at expenditures in CARS, well above the motor fuel sales tax funds that the city would have gotten absence CARS. In other words, we're getting a lot more money out of CARS in this particular period with the 199th in there than we would have otherwise, than we normally would, based on maybe being at 100, 200%. And CARS was built for this to some extent to allow smaller communities occasionally to do big jobs. Mm-hmm. And typically they don't do a lot of them in a row. And so over a 5-year period, that kind of goes back down to normal. But in the last 2 budget years, because of what we call this 80% rule. So basically, every city in the county is guaranteed over a rolling 5-year period to get 80% of their money back that they put into CARS. So the big cities are kind of net donors most of the time and hovering around 80%. The Lenexa, Overland Park, maybe Leawood, Olathe. And they know that. They knew that going into CARS. And I was in one of them one time. We knew that. Every year we basically gave $1 million to fund road projects elsewhere in the county because it was, being deemed to be beneficial to the county as a whole. But in order to make the 80% rule work in the last couple years, they have everybody's first priority projects has been cut, including Spring Hills in 23 and 22 and 23 by, I don't have the percentages in front of me, 15, 20%, their requests to bulk up the cities so they wouldn't drop below 80% reimbursement through CARS. So that's made a lot of cities, and because the CARS has been running a little late, that's caused all these cities who had already pretty well set budgets to not be able to make their budget because their CARS allocation didn't end up coming in the way they thought it would. This could have happened years and years ago, but I'm not actually, frankly, recall in my entire history that this has come into play. So it's made a lot of the other communities not terribly happy, and then they're looking at Spring Hill that has 700% of the money that we put into CARS. We're leading the county. We've been very successful at funding, and my concern is more for the long-term relationship with our fellow communities and our TRC members in the county of being in this position, having this funding, and some of it coming from cutting funding of the other cities in 23 funding to them, and then not spending the money. And when they could have been bulked up, and if we, things happen, and if we push it, we push it. But it is an issue to the point where the TRC, at the request of some of the communities, brought up a subcommittee at the last meeting that's with a charge to revisit the 80% rule and see. And this has been a conversation for a while, but certainly once communities it started costing them money, and I don't know what they're going to just revisit it. Whether that means they put a cap on, there's never been an upper limit. So maybe they do that. Who knows what the subcommittee is going to come out of. I've again requested that Mr. Spear be on that committee to represent Spring Hill, and get acclimated with the other folks involved in that. But it's particularly challenging optics to be in this position, and then also to be pushing the project that's a significant driver of the unhappiness from some of our neighbors, if you will. Probably the rule for funding will, if it gets changed, will presumably not really be to our advantage as a smaller city that's growing. Edgerton, some of the other cities are in this. Maybe there something will come out of it. The other item that was mentioned is it will cost us about $300,000 to $400,000 a year based on the current interest rates to push the project. And since the CARS money is capped, it's obviously $400,000 or whatever the increase is will have to be paid for by the city. The project's not going to get less expensive. I think I think about 300 is yet to be spent, and delaying it would cost Wisconsin. That will be a city cost. We also have been working with a developer who anticipates this being done at a certain period of time. Whether how that affects his decision to develop, I can't really tell you. I will say the fundamental problem with cars is not necessarily what's going on right now, but I just want to make you aware that we're not fighting with, but we're competing with other communities in Johnson County over essentially the same amount of money we were competing with the other cities in Johnson County 30 years ago. CARS program has not increased because motor fuel sales taxes receipts haven't increased. And matter of fact, as you know, they're going the wrong direction typically. So, when you had $15 or $18 million a year in 1993, that was a lot different than competing over $15 million in 2023. And that is, from a person that builds things standpoint, that's, the challenge. And what I would challenge this subcommittee is not only look at how the money is allocated, but they need to be searching for other funding sources and other ways to make cars relevant again. Mm-hmm. The buying power of this, it's important to us. It's $3 million. It's not a small amount of money in this particular project's case, but it's not as relevant as it should be because of you've seen the cost of the necessary transportation improvements in Spring Hill, and everybody else has that problem.
Mm-hmm. What would you say the bond payment would be on this project? Roughly?
680 something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Call it 700.
7 to 8.
We spoke to the developer in that area, the development. They anticipate.
Another microphone.
Sorry. Thought I had it on, sorry. We anticipate that the development on the south side of 199th will have a final plat by early spring of '24. And then after that, we would anticipate that there would be some movement of the project. And in between now and then, we would be working on a development agreement with that individual.
Any more questions?
So in layman's terms, we eat 300,000 this year?
I'm sorry?
We have to pay out 300,000 if we do nothing?
Well, it will effectively cost you that much more, by the delay, something on
By
that
the
order.
delay, but we don't pay that, you're right. Okay.
No.
It's not a penalty.
No, that's
Ours-
No, there's no penalty.
Increase
Design,
every
but
year.
we can keep the design for the most part.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, usually the other thing I would say, I don't know what the delay would take the form of. Typically, when communities have a delay, it's just a delay. They're working on it, and, TRC, they describe whatever challenges they have, as opposed to, I'm not sure I've ever seen a CARS project where the city has formally pushed the project year, in a capital improvements program, and whether that would make any difference to the TRC.
Yeah, maybe we can just find a ways to delay it then.
I was gonna say, my concern of losing the funding would be, I don't want to lose that 3.6 million funding. So if there's ways we can go about this project and not lose that funding, and if that's, again, we get creative with ways to delay, we do what we need to do. But that's my biggest sticking point is I do not want to lose that funding for that project by pushing it. So if we won't lose it and we can still push it, that would be my ideal goal.
I think so.
I was wondering, on the other project that was CARS money on the other side of 169 Highway, going towards Veterans Park, was that Johnson County that did that? Because I believe that was delayed a couple of years.
That's correct, and it has been delayed a couple of years.
Yeah, so Johnson County themselves even delayed.
Correct.
Okay. And we do have the highest mill levy of all the cities.
Yeah, I think it'd be fairly reasonable for us to say, hey, we have to pump the brakes a little bit or delay because of this. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to say.
There's some
Especially
real,
for
I mean, there's some legit negatives, you know, and there's definitely risk, and, you know, there's really no doubt that if we delay it, the cost of the project is only gonna go up, it's not gonna go down. So, you know, I think this, you know, what Dan has said and a lot of what Diana said is, you know, precisely why this decision is so difficult,
Yeah.
at least for me.
Yeah, it's tough.
You know, there's real world negatives to delaying it, and there's real world negatives to moving forward with it. And so we're trying to figure out which way to go. I told Lane earlier today when we met that this is probably the most difficult decision that I've had sitting up here so far. So, and I really believe that's pretty accurate. So.
Yeah, I just think it's timing. I can go back to that. Anyway, yeah. We approved so many developments and I don't know. I think the timing's bad on this one. I do. I agree that I think it's gonna cost more next year, but I don't know where we're gonna get the money this year,
Yeah.
to be point blank.
Yeah, the only way to get the money is to me not worth it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with it. That's the unfortunate part.
Yep, concur.
I'm gonna talk about timing here just for.
Thank you, Dan.
Just for a minute.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
So if the 5 mil or any increase is not approved this year for 24, then the project has to stop. Because in 24, we need to get temporary financing in place so that we can do the construction and work the timeline that Dan just gave you if the project was going forward. So we won't do that in 24. We won't acquire temporary financing because we have no way to pay for it. That's like plain cash basis law. We can't take on debt, we can't pay. And so then for the 25 budget, if we want that project to go forward, I'll propose again a 5 mil increase so that project can go forward. If that council does not approve it, we'll keep going. Now we're running into 207th Street.
Yeah.
And our goal was in starting early, you put it in place now and we can get these projects going and debt dropping off and all those things, and it all would work together. I'm afraid in 2 years, your chickens will be home roosting at 8 or 10 mil levies. If we want to continue those projects down the line.
Just this project.
Right, it is a snowball
Yeah.
to other things.
Domino effect.
Yeah. But I want everyone to understand, and again, you're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
We're just proposing what reality is and you get to decide. But we will have to stop that project for all of 24 and reconsider it for 25 because we cannot pay we cannot commit to temporary financing. We do not have a
Without a
way to pay for it. And the only way to pay for it that I know of is through a mill levy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
And
say
we'll keep kicking it down the road.
the one kick down the road will show us what these new developments look like.
Agreed, yeah.
If they're not coming like we think they're coming, we don't want to do what the school district did and jump ahead of ourselves and that's what I'm kind of trying to prepare us for, is that we can do all these improvements and then say the economy keeps stumbling. We're doing it for 10 years down the road rather than what we think may be coming in 2 years or so far. So for me, I'd rather wait and see. That 1 year gives us that cushion to be able to see, okay, well, we're actually going in the right direction. So now let's go ahead and move forward, and things may look different, but that's just where I'm at with it. I mean, that's my outlook on it. Now there's ways to, if I'm looking here, if we drop the open position, drop the merit raise increase and the CBIZ adjustments, that's about 300,000 there. I mean, if we really wanna go crazy with it, I'd say we'd have to go bare bones on everything on your side, and if we're gonna make the citizens do anything, we'd have to go crazy bare bones, and nobody here is gonna like that either. So it's, it's one way or the other. We can't kind of.
My plan was in proposing, so 5 is the number that we have. If we're gonna talk about 3, well then to keep going forward, the other 2 has to come from somewhere. So that's 340,000. It would have to come from the operating budget.
Yeah.
And so my thought was, we would have, to get the 5, we'll have to cut, and the staff would have to come back with the way we would accomplish that.
Yeah.
I've looked at different scenarios to do that. And if that's the reality we have, that's what it is.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do that project eventually, that's gonna happen.
I even briefly thought about if we stayed at the same mill levy rate and kept the 199th project in. Just thought about it, but I think the cuts and things we would have to get rid of with that would be
Would hurt us too much to
overwhelmingly
Yeah,
undesirable.
exact. That's
I think we would be looking
it's-
at
it's not-
letting go of people.
unless you want to jump into the reserve for the 1 year.
Nope.
That's the problem
It-
too. You don't want to do that.
It's a good point. You're not talking a 1-year commitment, you're talking at least.
Exactly.
At
So
least a
it's-
10-year commitment of nothing,
That's of us saying,
jobs.
these things are going away for a long period of time, unless we're willing to jump it up.
I mean, so for me, like I have tried to game out almost every scenario,
Yeah.
even the bad ones, and like to me, that's a very bad one.
Yeah.
But it is one that I thought about for a little bit.
And that's what, her and I had a long conversation, Rhonda and I.
Yeah.
We went back and forth. We went through just about every
Scared
line
me to
item you can
death, I'm
think of.
just gonna tell you that.
She was terrified
Yeah.
with me.
He's like, cut all these things, cut them.
Yeah, I was like, what are we doing
whoa, wait a minute.
But at the end of the day, all I'm gonna say is, I'm for keeping it what it is, working out the way you can with what you got, and I mean, I'm a little bit scared of the car stuff, but I think we can probably kick the can down the road a little bit just for the 1 year, and then make another decision next year. I don't want to keep kicking it down the road, but hopefully by that point we come up with something different.
Okay.
I don't know what it is, but we'll have a whole year.
I have
then
a
to work
question
on it.
about what happens. I'm sorry. I have a question about what happens if we push this 1 year. I'm assuming that pushes everything else on that list back a year. Is that correct?
The smaller projects that are in
Yeah.
25,
So can't we probably jump one of those up?
Mm-hmm.
we could probably accomplish one of those. I'm not saying that with
Flip-flop
Okay, so maybe we just swap them.
Yeah.
right, basically.
207th would be
Okay.
a serious question.
Then right, that's where the snowball gets.
But that, I still have serious questions on if we're gonna need it at that soon.
207th.
Yeah,
The development down the road has to go in.
yeah, I think you're gonna have to see some major development there to really make it worthwhile here
Agreed.
coming soon. I'd rather do 199th before we do 207, so.
For sure.
I was just saying, if you delay 199th, yes, that absolutely
Yeah.
delays 207th too.
Oh, yeah, for
Sure
sure.
it does.
And I think we just have to be okay
Yeah,
with
we
that.
can't
If we're gonna make that decision,
shoulder 2
we're
big
saying we're okay.
projects.
So,
The other variable that's out there is we're currently working with KDOT, and also our grant administrator to see if we can get some funding, for projects that are at, 169 Highway at 191st Street, which is about in the ballpark of anywhere between $1 million to $5 million to the city, and then 183rd Street, which is the same price, depending on what the project entails, is gonna be between probably 1 to 5 million is the city's cost. So there's some really big, important projects coming that there's gonna be a ripple effect. However we do this, we push it a year, we could potentially have 4 or 5 projects come together in 2025, 2026.
those are big projects that affect people where they're willing to pay a little bit more. I think with what we're talking about with the 199th, I don't think people see the value in it at this point for it to make sense as a community for us to push for it right now. If we get to there and they're like, hey, they're willing to do stoplights or they're willing to do whatever, I think people are gonna be more willing when we have that conversation to say, yeah, I guess for the time being, it's worthwhile. So that's just my outlook on it.
Yeah, I think to play to your point there, I think like everybody can see the value of needing a stoplight at 191st and
Yeah.
169, especially with the new school over there and the schools that are already there, and then Dayton Creek over on the other side. I mean, that's a lot of traffic.
Part of the discussion that we do have with the developer at 199th is when the road will be started and then what type of design it is, so, that is, and I know we've had.
We should have
I think we
design.
should be
right?
planning.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think we should be planning for it with the developer. I just think, I think they gotta make the first move.
I was gonna say, we got those other developments to come in.
When they
And
start,
saying we're gonna do 207th, I think we're gonna have a plan that we can show them saying, hey, this is what we've got planned,
yeah,
and go from there. But again, to me, it's just, I just don't, where I'm coming from, where what I do, I just don't see a lot of development happening in the next couple of years. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with holding off on some stuff as long as we're not going to lose a ton of money. But I think a year we're probably not going to lose all that money. So
My thing is, I don't think we can see in the future that far clearly. You know, I
Yeah.
think another year, maybe the future, maybe things will be a little easier to see. You know, as far as interest rates and what development happens and cost of goods that affect development and whatever else. But I think it's a good project. We've got to be planning for it. I just think the developer needs to start making. I mean, you know, if they're once we have movement, I think then we can start. Once we have movement, 6 months of movement, we could say, hey, they put up 15. They put up 30 houses in 6 months, or they put like they're. But I just again, we approve a lot of developments and nothing happens. And I get it. Like interest rates went up for everybody, right? Like it's not just us that it's the developers too got that are paying 8% or whatever. So I guess. So yeah, my thought is let them make the first move on doing what they say they're going to do, and then us be ready to follow in the following year, or to come in the following year and take action on our end of the streets if that's what needs to be done.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on that? Any other questions for Mrs. Dunn?
I'm gonna give you a real 2-second brief on the CIP. There are no changes to the CIP. I added the field about funded and unfunded to try to clear up what's really committed there. I went back to the planning commission on Monday and it was approved unanimously by them. I can't say approved. They agreed that it is in line with the comprehensive plan unanimously and brought it forward. I had answered their concerns. We committed 100,000 for sidewalks that they asked for and the mayor agreed to. And so we accomplished what they were looking for and they approved it. Not approved it, they recommended it. So, anything else? We will be back here Monday at 7 PM for the special hearings and hopefully my plan is to see a budget approved Monday night. Okay, thank you so much for your input. I know you guys are struggling. We've asked you to do something very difficult and I really value the time you put into it and the thought for sure. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
With that, that ends formal council action. We'll move on to announcements and reports. I don't have a lot to add, just that I'm excited to get Woodland Street going, excited for the base repairs that have been done, and then for the repairs that are gonna be done to that street. And I know all the neighbors and anybody around there that drives on that street will be super happy when that gets all wrapped up. And then also with all the other road projects going on, excited to get all those going. And I think we've done a lot on roads this year. We still got a lot to go, but we've accomplished a lot. And I think by the end of the year, come Christmas time, we'll have accomplished probably much more than any other year on roads. So excited for that. I think that was a big thing coming in here that citizens spoke on that they wanted to see done, and I think we've done a lot to accomplish that this year. We still got a ways to go, but we're making good headway. So with that, Mrs. Roth?
I'll kind of reiterate exactly what I think almost everybody up here has already said. This is a tough one. You want to make sure that you're making the right decision for the community and the citizens as a whole. And I don't want to rehash the discussion items, but I think everybody is not taking it lightly. They're definitely trying to. I'm trying to gather as much data and information as possible, as many resources as I possibly can. Brian said this is definitely a tough one. It's up there. I do agree with this conversations of when we talked about approving those developments on 207th, there was a lot of concerns from the citizens of the neighborhood that already existed saying you need to get the street in first, you need to get the street in first, you need to get the street in first. Well, if we would have done that, we would have spent all that money on that street and the developer still hasn't done anything. So I agree with everybody's point of we don't necessarily have to rush to get the road in until we see some progress. Again, I guess I have my business bonnet on and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, let's maximize this capital that we have. And I want to make sure we don't lose it. So I want to make sure that we're very careful with the citizens' money and our budget and we're spending it wisely. I would hate to lose that funding. And it sounds like that's not, an absolute. That's I think we can maybe push it and see what happens. I just want to make sure that we're all being. It sounds like we're all being diligent and taking it seriously. Nobody's taking this lightly. So it's a tough decision, and I don't think anybody's excited about it, but it's just one of those things that we get to do. So other than that, no report.
Mr. Van Houten.
Yeah, so, as it relates to the budget, I think that, just a couple facts. The median income in Spring Hill is $100,000. The average new home price is $400,000, so.
Household income.
Correct. So, that seems like a decent amount of money. 400,000 seems ridiculous, right? So there's some disparity amongst, just different people in our communities. And, we're trying to take account for everyone. And so I think, these are hard decisions, but I think everybody's pretty on board with the right way to proceed, which is with caution and with prudent financing, or budgeting. So, that's all I have.
Mr. Peel.
Fall Festival is only 2 weeks away. If you haven't ever attended Fall Festival, overall, probably the biggest event that we have here in town throughout the year. My opinion has always been that the Saturday morning parade is the best event of the year in Spring Hill. If you've never had a opportunity to participate in the parade, either as a spectator or someone who walks in it, it's really fun and really cool. And when I first moved here, I thought parades were hokey and just not as big as they are. And this particular parade and event has completely flipped my mindset on that. So it really means a lot to Spring Hill. It means a lot to the citizens. So I'm excited for that to come up here in a couple weeks.
Absolutely, I'll echo that. My family loves it. All my kids love it. Every year they ask. My youngest, my 6-year-old's probably asked me 15 times already when it's going to be. So yeah, they're super excited about it. It's a lot of fun. Mr. Young.
I was going to talk. Brian stole my thunder. That's all.
Yes.
Everything else.
Stole his topic.
Thanks for the dialogue. I mean, for me, I've been struggling with the budget for a long time, so I thought it was really good to go through the way we did. But we beat a dead horse. I think as pretty hard as we could. But overall, I think we're all trying to do what's right. And so thanks for taking the time to do all that.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about, and we all see the need, but at the end of the day, our citizens are what matters, and I think we try to do what's best for them. So, absolutely, Mrs. North.
I was just going to comment on the community orchard that's behind City Hall. There were some pretty good Asian pears. I took the time to get a couple there, and I don't know if the rest of the community's gone there to pick it. I hope it's not just spoiling on the tree, so if anybody still wants to pick some.
Mr. Massey.
Kind of short, we're getting towards the end of the Veterans Memorial Project. That'll be wrapped up hopefully by the end of the month roughly. And then we have a ceremony that's scheduled for November 11th.
11th, 10 a.m.
10 a.m. So excited about that. It's a good project. There's still a few things to do to finish it all off, but it's going to be a really great amenity to the community.
And that was one I meant to echo and I forgot. But November 11th is actually Veterans Day, so we'll be dedicating Veterans Memorial. We got a lot of exciting things planned. Got a committee that's working on a bunch of different things, so I think it's going to be a really fun morning. It's going to be really cool to dedicate that and really have what that park was meant to have, and that's something to commemorate our veterans and thank them for all their service and sacrifice. So I think it's going to be a fun day. We're going to have a lot of fun things for kids and veterans and everybody else involved. So it'll be a lot of fun. So come on out, November 11th, 10 a.m. Rain or shine. Chief Henson.
No report.
Madam Clerk.
No report.
Mrs. Dunn.
I've said enough.
Mrs. Jones.
No report.
All right, with that.
You forgot Jake to see if he wants to.
Oh, Mr. Spear, you got anything to add?
I should have moved him up and sit down here.
Join us.
This guy on his first night, he's
Put him on the.
I just want to take a moment to thank the mayor and council for the appointment, for the opportunity. I'd like to thank Mr. Massey, Ms. Jones for their help through the process. I'm excited about the opportunity, excited about helping the city and in its endeavors. So just thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Excited to have you.
Got lots of good stuff for you to work on.
With no money. I'm just
Welcome aboard.
With that, we'll go ahead and move on to executive session.
Take a
And
break before.
do we need a break before we go to that?
I could.
We'll take a 5-minute break. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. So, looks like we need 15 minutes for executive session. So if somebody wants to do that motion, we'll add 5 minutes.
Brian, go for it.
Mayor, if I could add,
Yeah.
our city attorney has been on, joining this meeting via phone call, so I don't know if he had a report, but he will be joining you all in executive session on a phone. So I just thought I'd let people know.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe, did you have anything to add in announcements or reports?
I didn't have a report, but my new report is thank you, Madam Clerk, for not forgetting about me. It feels great to be seen, and I'll talk to you guys all in executive session.
I thought he was online, but I didn't want to call his name out and be like, crickets. So- All right, who, you got that motion, Brian? Anybody else?
Yeah. So let's see. We'll go.
If you just do 4 minutes, then you.
Yeah, I'm gonna do 9 to 9:15.
Yep.
I'll make a motion the city council recess into executive session for 15 minutes to receive advice of council to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel of KSA 75-4319B1 of the Kansas Open Meeting Act to discuss potential hire of non-elected personnel. The open meeting will resume in the city council chambers at 9:15. No formal action is anticipated following the session. Persons to be in attendance are the following: Spencer Lowe and the city attorney.
Second.
Got a motion second. Is there any further discussion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. We will see you guys shortly.
For what? That's another one I got. Oh, you did? For that. I like that too. It's the best. That's absolutely best.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Let the record reflect that the governing body reconvened in an open meeting at 9:15 PM. No votes were taken or decisions made during the executive session. The discussion was limited to the subject stated. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
No, it's.
Oh, no motion, I'm sorry. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Now I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0-0.